Okay, I'm going to briefly run over the Book of Omni, the tidbits we learned from the Book of Omni, and how they apply to laying a foundation for the narrative of the Book of Mosiah. It's very simple and it's very summarized, so feel free to add details as you would like. But first, here we have the land of Nephi. Sometimes it's called the land of Nephi, Lehi, or the land of inheritance. Whatever you want to call it, that is what it is. That's where the Nephites were living, and they had Mosiah there with him. And at some point, the Lord warned them and said, you need to flee out of the land of Nephi. And so those who were faithful and Mosiah fled. And they left, and they went in the wilderness, and they traveled, and they traveled, and they traveled. And we learn that they came to a land called the land of Zarahemla. So Mosiah and his righteous Nephites go to the land of Zarahemla, and there they find a people called, surprise, surprise, the people of Zarahemla. And their leader at the time is Zarahemla. Are we all surprised? Sometimes I forget, Zarahemla was actually a person. It wasn't just the city name, he was a person. But they were very excited when they saw Mosiah and his people. They were excited because Mosiah and his people brought the records of the Jews, and I assume they're probably also excited because they share stories and find out they came from a common origin, a common place, so I'm sure it was exciting for them to see each other. It was interesting here that the people of Zarahemla, they came over from Jerusalem about the same time with Mulek, who was one of King Zedekiah's sons. And they came over, and they'd been living here in what we call now the land of Zarahemla since they arrived. And since then, their language had become confounded, which basically just means there'd been so much change over time that the language that they spoke now was different enough from what they spoke over in Jerusalem that these two couldn't understand each other. So we learned that King Mosiah, well, I should back up. He's not a king yet, but Mosiah teaches Zarahemla and his people his language so that they can understand one another and learn about one another. And then it's after this point that Mosiah helps to unify both the people of Zarahemla and the Nephites, and they make King Mosiah, well, a king. So there we go. You've got his crown. So that's what we learned there. We also learn about a large stone that was engraven, and King Mosiah translated it or interpreted it, and they learned that there was this city, we're going to put it up here, somewhere in the land northward. We know it as the land of desolation, but not yet. And all they really learn is that there was a guy named Coriantumr who came and lived with Mosiah and his people. And all they know is that his city was destroyed, or his whole civilization really was destroyed. Sorry, I forgot to grab my little Coriantumr figure. How could we forget? So he had dwelt with the people of Zarahemla for 9 moons, which we suppose is maybe about 9 months. And that's really all we hear about him and this land northward at this point. But it's just important that you remember that they knew that there was some land northward, and that there was a civilization that was destroyed and that there were bones scattered about. That's really, for the purposes of the narrative of Mosiah, at this point, all you need to know, and keep that in mind. So then, of course, Amalekite, who is one of the narrators and writers at the time of Omni, pauses with this little narrative, and he bears his testimony about Christ and invites others to come into Christ. And then at the very end, he's like, oh, wait, just kidding, I forgot something. And he talks about, let me grab this next one. This one also, he's not a king yet, but his name was Zenith, and he took a chunk of these people. I don't have another set of people. This says Nephites, but it could have been Nephites and people of Zarahemla, because they were united at the time. But he took Zenith. I should not say Zenith yet, because we don't actually know that his name is Zenith yet. We don't learn that until later in the Book of Mosiah. They just call him a strong, stiff-necked man. And he takes these people, and they come in the wilderness trying to get to the land of Nephi. But then they start fighting and fighting and fighting, and all but 50 of this group actually gets killed. And then the remainder return back to the land of Zarahemla. And then later, Zenith, again, just this strong, stiff-necked man that we don't know his name yet, but the strong, stiff-necked man says, okay, let's try again. I want to find the land of Nephi. So he takes another group, and we hear that they leave. And at this point in Omni, Amaleki, again, the one who's narrating, says, I know of this group that left, had a contention and came back, and then I know of a group that left again, and my brother was in that group, but I haven't heard anything from them since. So this is where we're left with the story at the end of Omni. We know that people left, but we don't know anything about them. And I really should have made a little figure for Amaleki, but the last thing that we learn in Omni is that Amaleki was born and lived through the reign of King Mosiah, and that he lived to see the reign of King Benjamin, who was King Mosiah's son. I need to find my King Benjamin. Here we go. There we go, King Benjamin. And so we know that Amaleki gave King Benjamin the plates because Amaleki did not have any posterity. And he knew that King Benjamin was a just man and would write in them and use them. So that was kind of a choppy description, but that's what we get from Omni. We're left knowing that Mosiah came to the land of Zarahemla, that they united this people, that Mosiah has died since, and that we actually don't know if Zarahemla is dead or not. We know Coriantumr. We don't know much about him, but that he's now not part of the narrative anymore. Who knows? Zarahemla might have died. He might still be alive, but we're going to put him away for now. But now we're left with King Benjamin, who we'll learn about in the first chapters of Mosiah, and we'll learn all about his great sermons on service and loving one another. And we'll see in the Book of Mosiah what happens to these people who Amaleki said, ooh, my brother's with them, they're gone, I haven't heard about them. We'll learn about them later in Mosiah.